there, and welcome to Leading Change Conversations, the podcast where we tackle real-life challenges with leaders like you to make organizational change a breeze. In this episode, we explore how to navigate change from a CEO's perspective, transitioning from an organization that is heavily focused on efficiency to an organization that is centered around the customer, which is a very different approach. We also discuss merging agile mindsets and behaviors with standardized approaches and risk-averse mindsets. So I am Ulrike I am your host, and I train, coach, and inspire leaders to become successful change agents, to communicate with impact, and to lead with authenticity. Now let me introduce you to our amazing guest, Martin Brettenthaler. Martin started his career 25 years ago in process industries, building materials and wood. He was member of the executive committee of Hayek Group at the age of 30, then made a management buyout together with partners of Pavatex, a wood fiber insulation producer, which they sold successfully in 2015. After that, Martin became CEO of Swiss Krono Group, a world-leading producer of wood-based panels for furniture industry and flooring, with production sites in Switzerland, Poland, Germany, France, Hungary, Ukraine, Russia, and the US. A turnover of 2 billion Swiss francs and 5,000 employees. He left this position in January 24 to look out for new challenges. Martin, welcome, first of all, and thank you for being here.
Ulrike, thank you for having me.
As you were CEO, it's always very interesting to speak to people who had that position, because I know that for many leaders who are listening to this podcast, it sometimes feels a bit like a secret how these decisions are made up there and how they are then brought into the organization where most middle management leaders then have to make them happen in a certain way, turn them into reality. And I'm really pleased that we have you here so that you can give us some insights from these strategic levels that you have seen and decided on when it came to changing things in organizations that are based on an international level. Can you explain a little bit more the context we will speak about today?
Certainly. So when I joined this group, it was a successful group. It consisted of individual plants and operations that collaborated only to a certain and limited extent. And it was run as a kind of financial holding. The DNA of the group was very much efficiency oriented, but also inwards oriented, not so much oriented towards customer needs and customer and market developments. And my briefing, or what we defined as our mission, together with our leadership team, was to gradually change this without putting at risk what has made that group strong and great in the past. So it was really about developing this group, but not risking all those things that have worked well. And it is especially, and I've been in different situations where there was an obvious need for change, which was obvious to everybody because the company was in difficult financial shape, for instance. This was not the case here. So the first and the most important thing you have to do is you have to build a convincing change story. People need to understand why change should happen. And above all, why change is also something which is attractive to them personally and professionally. If you don't do that, people will say, yes, we will go into that direction, but they will not be in there with their heart. And this is the first thing you have to do. So you have to, when you join a new group, a new company, you have first to understand precisely how people are ticking, what the values are, then identify and build a common dream, and then tell a narrative that is convincing and engaging for the whole organization. And the whole organization, you have been saying that, Ulrike, this group has been active in many countries, so that encompasses different cultures, different value sets. And you have to find a story that meets the interest in the hearts of 90% of the people. You will never make 100, but of most of the people on different hierarchy level and also in different cultures, in different countries. And this is the first task. And obviously you have to do it together, not solitarily in an ivory tower, but together with the board of directors, with the owners, if it's a family-owned company like this was the case, and of course also with the management team on all the different echelons of the group. And you need to take some time to do that, because this story is then going to be your big plan and your big narrative for the next years to come.
Yeah, exactly. Let's look into this a little bit deeper, because that's actually the whole secret about it. And that's also the whole difficulty and challenge about it. Because, what I see, I work a lot with leaders from very different levels. And for sure, they have very different, or human beings as such have very different motivations. And some human beings are very, very strongly safety, security oriented, and by nature refuse change quickly or need a lot of time to analyze all the pros and cons, evaluate the risks before they actually decide, yes, I will buy in and I will really be engaged in this project now. And you certainly know that as well. And like you said, it's very important to find this famous change story that somehow fits to everyone. And that is very, very difficult. From my experience, I was myself also in a C-level position for several years. And you mentioned the word ivory tower, that you need to get out of your ivory tower. And that is not that easy because obviously we all have our own biased view on things. We have this perspective. If you are in the ivory tower, let's call it like that, you have a lot of information that many other people in organizations do not have. And that means while building this change story, the whole challenge is that you make it really tangible for them. And like you say, with the heart and not just with the mind, because with the mind, it's easy. People understand that very easily, but they will not buy in. If the heart is not in, they are not in, basically. And what did you do? Because you said some things like, yes, you have to work obviously bottom up towards the board of directors, investors, or if it's a family-owned business, but also you have to work top down, obviously, to work with your leaders in how they see things so that you can create a story that fits really the whole organization. What were some concrete actions that you were taking to make this happen, to organize all of that?
Well, first of all, when I joined, and this is the advantage if you join a successful and financially sound company where there is no imminent action needed. So you need to take your time. And I really went out, visited all the different operations, talked to virtually more than 100 people in a really structured setup, made what we called belief audits, where we really talked about everything but the short-term operational challenges to really get a grasp of what people think, how people see the business, how people see opportunities and risks. So this gives you a broad and unbiased perspective. Because actually, as you said, Ulrike, if you start too early, based on wrong premises, you don't get a good result and you don't get a good and convincing change story. And then afterwards, we defined a symbol and we defined a narrative that would resonate with many people. We are a Swiss company, so what we chose was not the most original thing, but it was very powerful. So we decided that we would climb the Matterhorn together. So that was the symbol we chose. So there are two things really to it. First of all, we made it a very quantitative target. So we equated the height of the Matterhorn to a clear financial target that we wanted to reach in a certain time frame of 4 to 5 years. And then, of course, we built very strongly on the story of climbing the mountain together. So you need a strong team, you need the right equipment, you need to prepare for quick weather changes, etc. So you can do a lot of those things and you can repeat it to different audiences all the time. So what we also did have been very simple things. So once we had this story, we really worked hard on telling all the different aspects. We brought world-class mountaineers to talk about the risks of climbing mountains. And this was something that does not resonate with everybody. But many people, even in such an engineering-driven environment like in process industry or like in that company specifically, this really made people move and made people think and made people act on what we said. And this really put something in motion which worked very well. So no rocket science, just do the things, but do it in a convincing way. And the most important thing is, of course, you as a leader or the leadership team as such has to live what we are talking about. So if you talk about collaboration, if you talk about standardizing processes, that was one of the key aspects, for instance, to make this work, then you have to do that. And you have relentlessly to work on that and to give people opportunity to excel in that dimension.
Mm. I like, you said two really nice things here. One is really the metaphor. I mean, that's a big classic and it's not used actually that much. It's quite surprising that even though we all know and heard very often that storytelling is the thing to reach people's heart and that they can listen and relate to something when we tell it in shape of a story, still it's not used very much, especially in the very, very high levels. I don't see it happening in this very how to say, a more complete way maybe on how to tell a whole change story. I like the metaphor very much. And it's funny because like 2 years ago, I shaped the internal communication strategy for a pharmaceutical group as a consultant. And I used also this metaphor with the mountain. And it's a fantastic metaphor, actually, because you can use, who is moving, maybe climbing the steep way. Yeah, which team is doing that and why? Who is maybe climbing the longer way, but the flatter way? Because that also you can play a little bit with the way on how people see how they want to climb this mountain. And obviously the materials that you use, like you say, for the weather conditions or the backpack or the shoes, or I don't know what have you, the sticks, I don't know. You can use all of that as a metaphor for tools that you actually use in the organization, digital tools, for example, or processes that you install. And I think it's amazing because people really relate to that. And bringing in some externals, what a fantastic idea, because this is how you reach the heart.
Ulrike, I think you're right. I mean, it is those metaphor thing is actually an easy thing, but it is not that widely used. And if it's used, it's often, I've seen that often it's done in a very, let's say, artificial or not company-specific way. So I always say if a big transformational project in a company has a title that would fit for any other company, it's not really a good type. It's not a good leitmotif for that matter. Another thing we have worked on to really try to be specific was to build a specific culture. Also, when you describe company cultures, you most of the times have the same attributes. But you need to make it specific. You need to render it really targeted and to the situation of the company. Otherwise, it's not interesting and it's not opening up the hearts and minds of people. So what we did in that regard were two aspects. One was that we coined the notion of Erfolgslust, and we even led this in the German meaning and used it worldwide. So really a desire, a hunger for success. And this is what we made the big leitmotif of the group, which resonated very well because it was always a group that was very entrepreneurial, especially when it was still extremely decentralized. And this was something that many people could actually find themselves in again. We also had a lot of people in Central and Middle and Eastern European countries. So people who are not yet at this economic situation that we have more in Western Europe. So people who are really hungry to make their living, to improve their lives. And so this whole Erfolgslust thing really worked very well. And the other thing we did when it came to culture was that we said we wanted to create a culture of players and learners. Mm-hmm. As opposed to knowers and victims. And this honestly, we did not develop this ourselves. We have seen that elsewhere. But this is such a strong concept because you can explain it to really everybody, to the top manager and to somebody working in the back office. It has a very strong family connotation because you can explain the difference between players and learners and victims and knowers with children in the kindergarten. Nobody wants his child to be a victim and a knower who always tells everybody else what to do, but is not interacting with others. And everybody wants to be a player and learner that progresses each and every day. And we found it very powerful. And with all those things, being it the Matterhorn example, being it these players and learners, being it the Erfolgslust, you have to repeat and reiterate it time and time again. It's not enough to tell it once or to make one video about it or one memo about it or one kind of other communication about it. You have to reiterate it all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the player-learner model is amazing. I'm just helping a customer actually to help to implement it in their organization. They have it as a pillar of their corporate culture. I think it's a model for life. And this is why people adhere very well to that, because it's really an attitude that you can have in your life. Will I stay in victim mode as soon as something happens to me that I don't like? Because that's happening to all of us every single day in small or big shape. So, a budget cut that is happening, something unforeseen that is happening, I don't know, a delivery, if you're in supply chain that wasn't coming. And you can always blame the circumstances and spend a lot of time in blaming what's going on. And then you're in the victim mode to make sure. But you can also decide, okay, I get out of that because what does it help if I blame and blame and blame? Oh, how bad it is. And getting to something more proactive, looking for solutions, trying out maybe something new. That's a bit the player-learner idea behind that. And it's such an important step in organizations because then people get out of watching out for the little things that are not working well and rather very quickly shifting their focus on things where they can actually do something on and where they can act upon, where they can make a change and help contribute to something more productive or constructive in that sense. So it's an amazing model. And I think, that works very, very well. A question that I also have when it came to what you mentioned before, obviously the next step, we had this model, and I think the way that you went around and really speaking to people, many CEOs do not make that effort or make it a little bit, but not deep enough. And then, like you say, it stays too superficial. The whole change story will stay too superficial if you haven't spoken enough to people. So you seem to go much, much deeper by speaking also to much, much more people and really looking into all the different geographical, so cultural areas as well. Then the change story was shaped using this metaphor. The next step is then obviously how do you bring this to the organization in a way that it's not just sent like a PowerPoint with some FAQs and maybe a kickoff meeting where this is quickly explained. How did you make sure that your leaders can use this change story not just by retelling it, by being able to retell it in their own words and in a way that comes from their heart? Did you do something specific about that?
Well, first of all, you can never do enough when we're talking with people, and I tried to do a lot, but I could certainly have done also more. And there are always facets in people you don't really reach. So it's an ongoing quest to be close, of course, and then not only to people but also to customers who give you an outside view. We did two things really, and that's really I think extremely important. After you have developed this whole narrative on a group level, you need to do two things. One is to make this story tenable to different audiences, as you say, and to give all your management, all your managers on all different levels the right communication tools to do that. And secondly, you have to immediately or quickly build a real strong financial plan, because after all, it's a company, it's about results, it's about financial results. So we started building what did not exist in that group before, a midterm plan covering 5 years, which was done in a very detailed way. Bottom up and top down, and we showed all the different investments. It was very investment heavy what we have been undertaking. There was a lot of change going on in terms of our product portfolio, in terms of our focus, in terms of efficiency investments, market investments, etc. And we detailed this very much. And really, this was a process that took half a year, 9 months, and where we really got everybody on board. The local management, the different group functions that in the process we have also been building up and strengthening. And in parallel, we made some simple graphic representations of the metaphor and of this Matterhorn and of this players and learners concept, and really distributed it to all those managers. What we did in our group is we had quarterly meetings with the global leadership team, where we reiterated that story. And then out of that, we distilled a kind of a specific handout that was much more usable in a much more broader way, and then handed that out to our people and followed up upon them, really communicating it down the cascade. And in parallel, we set up a kind of internal social media platform where we came from with top-down messages, CEO messages all the time again to reiterate those core concepts. So again, not anything which is rocket science, but still very solid management that is being very clear in what you say, follow up upon it, not just distribute it and then let it go, but really check, control, and verify that the message is passed on. Take feedback to refine it, to find out what parts have not been understood, what parts need to be improved, and then do it for the next time.
Mm-hmm. How did you feel personally about it? You said you had regularly CEO messages. How did you shape them? Is it something, a bit look behind the scenes, a bit of your way of thinking? How did you decide what will be in this message and how you will bring it across? How many, the ponderation maybe between pure facts and figures, but also emotions on the other side and empathy, for example, these soft factors. How did you balance that out? Did you do that consciously? Did you do it completely intuitively? What was your approach?
Well, this was certainly a process. As somebody who has been in process industries for 20 years, I'm obviously also a more quantitative person, a person looking on efficiency, numbers, facts and figures, and less so on feelings, emotions, or other not quantifiable aspects. On top of this, the culture in a wood-based panel company or process industry or building materials in general is very engineering driven, very male dominated. So people do not talk so much about feelings and emotions. So this was a process for me as well. So I started probably with too much a quantitative, hard fact-driven communication, but then over time found that if you open up if you show feelings, if you show empathy, that this works wonders actually. And once you have this kind of success stories yourself, you are much more at ease to show your emotions, show your feelings, and devote more on, let's say, emotional qualitative aspects than only facts and figures. But facts and figures remain important. At the end of the day, again, it's about results, quantitative results that you want to achieve. You should never forget that. But for me, it was a process also. So I did not have the same communication style in the first year than the one I had 5, 6 years after we began this journey.
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine. I think that is the important point, that people do not continue to hide behind figures and results because we feel safe. I know that many very senior leaders are very result oriented. This is how they got to this position as well. And like you say, it is absolutely crucial to keep that in mind and have control of the results, of the numbers, understanding the systematics behind that. But at the same time, for many people in the organization, it's not what really touches their heart at the end, even if they are themselves engineers. They like also this very factual area because it feels safe. It's a comfort zone, but it's difficult to engage the heart. Yeah, still, it's logical. And like you said, to going on this journey, I think is a good advice for anyone who is in the same situation, who feels very safe behind the numbers, who feels very safe in sharing graphs and these kind of things, which are very tangible. Like you say, you can quantify things. It's fantastic. It feels like, wow, that's really solid ground. But at the same time, you will walk on sleepy eyes when then suddenly you have to share a little bit more your human aspect of it, and really yours. It's not about finding a human aspect that might fit to the organization. It's about showing really how you feel about that. And what you said is a good trick, let's call it like that. When things have started to move on, and when you have first successes, for example, it's much easier to share the joy or the pride or whatever emotion is behind that, and to be authentic with that as well. Or sharing that now you're proud of where you've done it, but during the process, maybe you were worried, that you share this kind of vulnerability that, for some point I was a bit tense as well, I must say, or admitting things. And I think it makes, like you say, it does wonder because people can connect to it. They feel like, oh, it's just a human being as well, this guy.
Well, if you preach about everybody should be players and learners, you need to be that yourself. Yes. And if you give the impression that you already knew everything from the outset, then of course it's not credible. First of all, it's wrong, and then it's not credible, and then finally, of course, it does not really work with this players and learners culture that you invite the others to live for. It's a small path. As a leader, you have, of course, to send a message of confidence that you know that the team knows where you're going, what you want to do. But on the other hand, you need to be open enough that people see that, oh, okay, they're also learning, they're also adapting to changes, to new opportunities, to new challenges, because those times are over when you had people at the top who knew everything and knew exactly what they wanted to do and could have done each and every job in a company. I mean, that time existed 20, 30 years ago, but this is long gone. So you need to communicate, as you say, successes, celebrate successes, but you also have to communicate setbacks. And I think a very important part is once you are on the journey, you have obviously to track success, and you have to do it in a relentless way, but also in a realistic way. The worst thing is that if you make progress or if things develop in a way and then you overstate successes, this makes you lose credibility very quickly. So you have to say, well, this worked well. We are here where we wanted to be. We even exceeded maybe what we wanted to do. But here we are not yet there. And here we need to refocus our plan. We need to double down on working hard on that one, or we need to do this and that. And only if you do that in a way that is understood by everybody and that is shared by everybody, then you can actually keep people motivated. But that also means, of course, that you have the right people. And I think no doubt about it. I mean, you can be empathetic. You can build a metaphor and tell a story. At the end, once you have your plan and you start your plan, you have to look at the organization and you will have to identify gaps in the organization where people need to develop or you need to change people. Because if you change a group and a transformation, it also means that people to different extents have to change. In my example here, we had two major changes. One change was really to develop from a organization that was very much focused on efficiency and operation to something which was much more customer-centric. And on the other hand, we moved from a financial holding with decentralized organization to something which was working together much stronger across group, across geographies, across functions in a much more coordinated and standardized way. And that needs different people. If you focus on operations, it's very different as if you want to be very close to what happens in the market. Because as an organization, you have to become more extrovert. You have to be, not only you as the CEO, but the whole organization needs to be much more interested in what is going on outside, spending time with customers, learning what is going on. And then, of course, when you only focus on internal efficiency measures, you have them pretty much under control. You can make a plan and say, okay, you automatize this and that production step. We buy a machine that costs X. This will save so many FTEs, will save so many energy costs, etc. This is a business case, and we decide on that. If you decide on embarking on a journey where you launch innovative products, where you go into new markets, new channels, try out new things, then of course you need to be as an organization much more open to risk, much more risk-taking. And you also have to accept that not everything is working. And this is a tremendous change in behavior. And when it comes to the other axis, which is making a strong group that is really interacting and sharing, that's the same thing. If you have a decentralized group, you have people who are very agile, act very quickly, but might also be not so open to cooperate across borders, and who are obviously not so open to work in a really standardized way. And if you do not work in a standardized way in those areas where standardization makes sense, then you can never build a strong group. And in my example here, what we used as a vector for making this standardization work was that we had an SAP integration going on. Before, we had different ERP systems, different SAP systems in place, but we decided to make a common template, a global template that encompassed all the different processes and made them similar insofar as they could be structured in a similar way. But this also needs a lot of change, because it means that people, when they want to change ways of working, they need to do it. They need to do those changes from a group perspective, and it needs a different mindset of people. And not everybody can do this transition from efficiency orientation to customer centricity, and from working alone to working together. You have to help people to make the journey, but also you have to change some of the people. And you might not be afraid of doing so, even if you're a successful company. Otherwise, your journey will lead nowhere.
And I think this is a very important insight, because it's often so much underestimated. So that means we think, okay, when we explain rationally why this is important, people will change automatically. But nothing is more difficult than behavioral change. And when people are not risk-taking by nature, they will not become risk-taking because they are told to be so, or because they rationally understood why this makes sense. They really need to overcome a lot of internal thresholds to actually take risks. Or like you say, bringing people together who are agile and other people who love to work with standardized approaches, and to help both the ones who love to work in standardized approaches and in frameworks or with frameworks to become a bit more agile, which is not their nature, and the other one to become someone who actually is fine or feels more or less comfortable than in a standardized setup, whereas they are very agile and that is actually their strength, but they might be pretty chaotic and do not bring things to an end at the end. So I think this is the whole trick about that. And it's so important to always be very, I think you need to be very listening to the pulse of what's going on the people side, versus being on looking just at what's happening with the KPIs that we get in, because they can be a little bit not falsified, but show a wrong picture of the overall situation. And what I've seen often is that even if some of the KPIs looked good, what was boiling under the surface, so the people side, more or less, somehow it only showed up when it was already too late, and there was quite a big disaster already going on mentally, or from a buy-in perspective or motivation perspective. And I think staying behind that is very important. I think we could talk a long time about it. What would be some last words from your side when it comes to someone who really needs to bring in organizational change from the top? One of the top watch-outs that you would like to share?
First is that you have to be in it 150% all the time. It's a long and uphill battle to change a culture and to change a structure and to change a strategy, but it's really worth it. And it's a very enriching development or experience on many levels, because leading and being a CEO is, of course, you are the leader in the company. Leading is doing something together with other people, and nothing is more fulfilling than really changing something to the positive with a team, and you see people grow in that process. And if you have that in mind, and if you have the endurance to stay the road, even if some obstacles arise, then this is really something which is extremely interesting, which makes you a stronger person, and which is very insightful as a process as such. So be in there for the long run. It's not something which can be done in a year or so, but enjoy the journey because it's really worth it.
Thank you very much, Martin, for all of these insights.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into Leading Change Conversations today. If you want to improve your own skills on leading change or communicating more effectively, check out my courses for individuals on my website. We have a bunch of useful online live classes of 90 minutes coming up around overcoming procrastination, surmounting change resistance, communicating with impact, or influencing through presence. And until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and making a difference.